One of my friends had a birthday and we went out to a bar and I was sitting at the bar with one of my friends and it was this girl and I was talking to her and then she was like I'm thinking about getting into podcasts. You do a podcast, right? And I was like, "Oh yeah, I do a podcast." And I like got my phone out and I was like, "So this is how it works." And I
No.
was like explaining to her everything and I was like, "So you get on the Instagram and like you do this and this and this." And like as I was talking to her, I was like, this is my future. Like this is how and then I looked over after I was done talking, I was like, oh yeah, and this is how I pick up girls at bars. Cause it just seemed
Uh,
like such a thing a guy would do, be like, yeah, so like the thing I'm into right now is like it's pretty cool. You like get on the Twitter, you have to access this, and then at the end I was like, oh man. Because the more and more I talk about Solve It to my friends, the more and more I realize it is just such a specific market for like a very specific group of people that just like happen to love puzzles. And then the more and more I talk to these people, and there's like, you don't like puzzles at all. Like this is not this entire conversation has not been interesting to you. And I just imagine like me in the future talking to some girl, and at the end of it, she's like, uh-huh. Well, I'm gonna go back and talk to my friends now. Thanks for the drink. And it's like turns away, and I'm like, oh well, okay. Well, maybe I'll you can subscribe to it, and maybe I'll give you a shout out.
I think. Well, actually, and you did. That is what happened. You gave that
Yeah,
girl
yeah.
a shout out.
Shout out to Lauren.
I think the problem is we do have a market, and it's just me. It's me. The whole podcast has been created under the premise of this is a thing that I want to exist so that I can enjoy it, and it seems that that's our user base. It's just me. So you know,
Well, we also have
it's working well for me.
Darth Molly, who commented on one of our pictures. She asked someone to download the episode for her because she couldn't get it on her phone. So shout out to her. She's a huge fan. And also, we still do have our other number one fan, which is DDoS protection.
Did they comment again?
No, they didn't. Without been really funny.
I haven't noticed that. I'm actually on our Instagram now. Oh, hey, did you solve the puzzle?
No.
Okay. Hey, everybody, welcome to Solve It. This is a podcast that's about codes, ciphers, and the history of encryption. My name's Sam Cherry, and I'm hosting, as always, with
Zach Johnson.
Zach. How you doing?
I am doing well. How are you, Sam?
I'm doing well. This week, I sent you a puzzle. Do you have any guesses as to what it could be?
Well, so I was looking at the puzzle, and the first thing I did is I kind of searched puzzles that had the same like look to them. And so this puzzle is in a 5x5 grid, and a lot of puzzles that are in 5x5 grids, there's one called the Playfair cipher.
Sure.
And so I thought it was that one because it looks like a Playfair cipher, but the way a Playfair cipher works is you'd have to have the code word at the top. And looking at your tweet, I couldn't find what the code word might be. Like I tried topic and that didn't work. So I don't think it is it a Playfair cipher?
It is not.
Oh, dang it.
Okay. Also, I guess it'd be easier if we explained what the cipher was or what it looked
true.
like. So if you want to look at the cipher yourself, you can find it on our Instagram or Twitter at Solve It Podcast, and also on our website, solveitpodcast.com. But for those who don't have it in front of you, Zach, can you explain what the cipher looks like?
Yes, I can. So the cipher is, as I said, it's a 5x5 grid, and it's on top of what looks like an old piece of paper, kind of like a treasure map, which is very reminiscent of our last two episodes. So it is a bunch of like a 5x5 grid of letters, and so the letters are in rows, and the rows are G S R H R H Y V G G V I G S V M Y R Y O V X L W V. So there's a lot of like in Scrabble, these would be like really high letters. Like Z is worth 10 points, V is worth 8. I know a lot about Scrabble points. Shout out to my grandma.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, like, I'm thinking that this is not like a transposition cipher because you can't just like rearrange these into making a word. Because the only vowel is one I. That's the only vowel. Um, but there's lots of repeat letters, which makes me think that like if if I'm using like a substitution cipher kind of thing, the G's might be like E's or something like that, like a very high used letter in our alphabet. But that's what it
Sure.
looks like.
Yes, it is. It is a substitution cipher as opposed to a scrambled up one. So like most of our ciphers, it is that way. Um, it is actually the grid is actually a diversion,
Oh,
a minor diversion, in that it is in reference to another code system that is not an actual code system, that we'll talk about a little bit. But well, I guess I would talk about that one now. So it is a code that is derived from the Bible, the actual code, the one that I used to scramble this up. But there's another code called the Bible code, which I'm putting in quotes, which you can't see, but the Bible code, which comes from the History Channel, also in quotes.
I heard the air quotes that time.
Yeah. Um, and it's not worth getting into, but it's this really dumb, silly thing where you try to find clues to modern events by putting Hebrew letters in a grid and finding it's kind of like a crossword puzzle, but stupid and reductive. So a real cipher that is actually found in the Bible is the one that I used this week. But to explain why it's significant and what I think is important about it, you kind of have to go through some Jewish history. The tweet actually sent you something to the effect of, this has to do with all my favorite subjects or all my favorite topics. This week, it actually wasn't a clue to how to solve the cipher.
It was your actual honest favorite topics.
Yes, because usually the tweet has some sort of reference to you figuring out the, which I mean, you know me, so you know that
Yeah, I really should have picked up on.
Jewish history is one of my favorite
for our
subjects.
listeners that have not had the fortune of sitting next to Sam at any occasion, Sam loves Jewish history and he knows all about it.
So if you had looked up Jewish cipher, you would have found it, but I didn't give you an incredibly direct hint as to what it was. So
One of my favorite memories in college was one time I went over to your apartment and you had gone this big long rant about the genealogies of Christ being like mixed up, and I had no clue what was happening, but you were like freaking out because like the history just wasn't lined up on one thing was like mismatched or something. And you like locked yourself away for like 2 days. And I was like, hey, whatever became of that? You went, oh, I figured it out. And I was like, oh, okay.
It's not worth getting into.
Yeah, but this to let you guys know, Sam is a Jewish history buff.
It would become the whole episode, and we don't do that. I have, yeah. My friends know that I have to practice an incredible amount of restraint to not constantly be talking about Jew. And when I say Jewish history, I don't just mean like I read the Bible. That is also true. Like I am religious and I do read the Bible, but it's the like primary documents and reading stuff that isn't in the Bible that's about and like Jewish historians. I'm just very obsessive about that. So it is actually, even in this episode, will take every part of me to not talk for an hour and a half about the whole history of the Jews.
Really came out of the Christian closet in this episode.
Yeah, I did. But something that is interesting is you can track the history of the Jewish people just based on the different names that they're given. So have you ever wondered about why they're called Israelites and Jews and Hebrews? They have all these different names and they can be corresponded with different periods of time in Jewish history. The story of the people of Israel starts with a man named Abraham. He had lots of children. They went to
I know that from camp songs.
Yes, many sons and daughters. They don't get a song. And they all went to Egypt, which is where you get the story of Joseph and all of that. And then after the story of Joseph, at the end of the book of Genesis, lots of time passes. And at this point, they are, the children of Abraham. But then when they leave Egypt in the book of Exodus, they become known as the Hebrew people, and is the birth of the Hebrew nation. And Hebrew means to traverse. So they were called Hebrews because they were traversing across the desert out of Egypt. So that's where that name comes from. And then once they landed in the Promised Land, they took up the name Israelites because they were the nation of Israel. So one of the patriarchs, one of the founding fathers of the Jewish people, is a man named Israel, and he had 12 children. Well, he had 12 sons, and those 12 sons became the leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel, and so everyone was under the house of Israel, and so they were Israelites, and that's why they were the nation of Israel. And they lived like that for a long time. At some point, they got themselves a king, which did not turn out well. And then they got 2 more kings after that. And then a civil war started, splitting the nation of Israel into 2. You had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. After some time, the Assyrian people came in and conquered the northern kingdom and the 10 northern tribes. So the 10 tribes in the north were destroyed and sent out to in exile across Asia, and all that was left were the 2 southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin, who survived for a while until the nation of Babylon came in and took them over and sent them into exile as well. So they had to leave their home and go to Babylon. They destroyed the temple, and it was this tragic event in Jewish history. And because almost every tribe had been destroyed except for Benjamin and Judah, Benjamin kind of got forgotten, and they all became known as Judeans, which is derived from Judah, right? They are the people of the tribe of Judah because it was the only major tribe left except Benjamin, which got forgotten. And so they became known as the Jews. So when you refer to them in these different names, you could use it as a way to referring to them in different time periods. So the Hebrews are when they, were going from Egypt to the Promised Land, so Moses' time period. The Israelites are King David and the kings, that time period. And the Jews is the time of the prophets. So you can split their history into these 3 major sections based on the names they have. And the time period that this code comes from is the Jewish time period. And it's after they've been exiled out of their land and their temple has been destroyed, and they're living in Babylon. And while Babylon was a large empire, they did allow them to have some religious autonomy, so they didn't have to worry about, they could practice their religion, but still had to follow the Babylonian rules. But it was still, an oppressive government. And depending on who the ruler was, some were very kind and were very benevolent, and eventually let them go back to Israel. But some of them, like Nebuchadnezzar, who famously made them all bow down to a statue of him. So some were not as benevolent, and so the Jewish people lived in this fear of oppression from their government and from this nation that they were, essentially trapped in. Right, they couldn't leave. We see the prophet Jeremiah in some of his verses attempting to communicate to his people about the nation of Babylon, but he can't outright say it because, they are prisoners of these people. And so that's where this code that I sent you actually comes from. There's a couple of passages where Jeremiah refers to these other nations that we don't have any historical context for. We don't know who they are. We've never heard their names before. But if you use the coding language that I sent you, you can actually translate them. So I think one of them was like Shemek or something. And if you use the @bash cipher, which is what I sent you, it's @bash. It translates into Babylon. And then there's another one that's another name, and it translates into Chaldeans, which was another famous enemy of the Jews. Unlike some of the other ciphers we've used that were used for military campaigns or finding treasure, this is a way that the refugees of Israel could still communicate with each other and still have political views and political ideas and still hold on to this sense of community and nation while living under this oppressive rule of Babylon, which I thought was really cool and was really different from what we've been doing. but it gives a voice to these people that were voiceless. And for a lot of their history afterwards, the Jewish people have always been oppressed and have been voiceless. And I think @bash cipher is a good symbol of their resistance to that oppression and holding on to their heritage. So the way it works, you can actually kind of derive how you translate it from the name. @bash is a contraction of sounds from the Jewish alphabet. The first letter of the Jewish alphabet makes an sound, and the last letter makes a t sound. The second letter makes a b sound, and the second to last letter makes a sh sound. So t, b, sh. And you put that together and you get @bash, kind of. With a little poetic license, you get @bash. And the way that you would translate an @bash cipher is you would take the first letter and replace it with the last letter, and the second letter and replace it with the second to last letter. So if it was in English, it would be, you would take an A and change it into a Z, and a B, you change it into a Y, a C into an X, stuff like that. This is not, of course, in Hebrew. I thought about sending you a Hebrew version, but that just seemed too hard.
Next level impossible.
Well, right, because the way it would work is you wouldn't translate the letters into English and then, right, like you would have to have the Hebrew versions of the words. And it was like, okay, I'm not going to expect him to learn Hebrew for this, 20-minute podcast we do. So it's in English, but you would do it a similar way. So does that make sense?
Yeah. So is it just like you take the alphabet and then you write the alphabet backwards, and then that's what it like? So A is Z, B is Y, C is X.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, so the same thing that would happen is you got pulled over and had to say the alphabet backwards for whatever reason, because that's a skill everyone has.
Right. A thing that I definitely could not do sober. Like, what a weird, I think it's just it's a test to see how long it takes you for you to yell at a cop. And like the quicker you do it, the more drunk you are.
Yeah, if you are able to get coerced into doing that, then it's like, this guy's gone.
Yeah,
but if it's a sober person, be like, no.
Sir, that's impossible. Okay, I guess you can drive. Never mind.
I did not learn the alphabet backwards. That was not a part of my kindergarten curriculum.
Yeah, I don't have that sort of spatial reasoning to imagine that chart backwards. Zebra, yak, xylophone. I have no idea. I can't do this. I'm sorry. All right, you're probably sober. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because I'm actually gonna have to write this whole thing out, because there's no way I can just like off the dome.
Right.
No.
And while Zach is solving the puzzle, just want to remind you guys to rate and subscribe to the podcast in iTunes. It helps a lot with people trying to find the podcast and hopefully finding new people who love puzzles and want to solve them, and will hopefully send us puzzles. And if you want to send us puzzles, as long as they still follow the rules, we would love to try to solve them. There's a couple that have been sent to us that I am still trying to solve and can't figure out, but I'd love to see more from you guys. So thanks. Yeah, and again, I put it in a grid just so that I could have one less crack at the History Channel, who is so infuriating. I was watching a documentary, actually when I was researching this, I was watching a documentary about the Bible code, and you know that it's bad when I'm skipping through parts where they explain the Torah. I'm just like, no, dude, I can't watch this. I cannot. Oh, it's so irritating, and I can't. Because like basically what they're talking about is like, look, this 80 by 60 grid, and it's like, look, it has the word car and Dallas and assassination, and it's like, well, yeah, but you also have 4,600 like letters. Like, you can find anything in there, and people have gone and taken Moby Dick and done the same thing, and War and Peace and done the same thing, and like, it's just this absurd code, which is frustrating, and a thing that I'm always frustrated with the History Channel, where it's like, guys, there's an actual story that's really good here. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you do that instead of this thing that you did that is totally ludicrous?
Yeah.
So in light of all my disdain for the History Channel, what is the answer to this week's puzzle?
The answer is, this is better than Bible code.
Which it absolutely is. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this week on Solve It. I'm Sam Cherry, co-hosting with Zach Johnson. If you want to follow us on Instagram or Twitter, it is at Solve It Podcast, and on our website, solveitpodcast.com. Zach, I usually don't pull you in for the outro.
Whoa.
But we discussed, or I sent you a text about another project that we're working on, which is getting a Solve It Podcast MySpace page. How are we coming along with that?
Yeah, I'm definitely working on that. It's okay. I'm in contact with Tom right now. He is we're talking about getting the whole thing uploaded, like getting the whole site going again. So
well, the thing is, I was not joking about that at all. I really want that to happen. So if we could, hopefully by next week you can connect with us on our MySpace page, myspace.com/solveitpodcast. I don't know how the URLs work on MySpace anymore. So yeah, hopefully connect with us there.
Is that even possible?
I actually have no idea.
Like if I go to myspace.com right now, like maybe because it looks like it's a music website now.
We do make an audio experience.
Yeah. So
I would
maybe.
love.
I'm not no promises, but maybe.
Okay, good. Join us next week when Zach teaches us how to find the hidden meaning behind famous Renaissance paintings. Thanks. Bye.